The Indian Struggle by Subhash Chandra Bose, Part 24. India since 1857, a bird's eye view. Though the British conquest of India began in 1757 with the Battle of Plassey and the overthrow of the then independent King of Bengal, Nawab Sirajuddaulah, it was only by slow and gradual stages that the British occupation of India made progress. For instance, after the Battle of Plassey, only the financial administration of Bengal passed into the hands of the British, the political administration remaining in the hands of Nawab Mir Jafar, the man who had betrayed Nawab Sirajuddaulah at the last moment and gone over to the British. It was only by stages that the British could take over the entire administration of Bengal. Likewise, it was only by slow and gradual stages that the British rule could be extended over other parts of India. While this process of gradual annexation was going on, the British still formally recognized the suzerainty of the emperor at Delhi. It should be noted that in the occupation of India, the British used not only arms but more than arms, the weapons of bribery, treachery, and every form of corruption. For instance, the founder of the British Empire in India, Robert Clive, who was later made a lord, has been proved by historians to have been guilty of forgery. Likewise, Warren Hastings, a Governor General of India, was accused before the British Parliament by Edmund Burke, a member of the House of Commons, as being guilty of high crimes and misdemeanors. The greatest folly and mistake of our predecessors was their inability to realize at the very beginning the real character and role of the British who came to India. They probably thought that, like the innumerable tribes that had wandered to India in the past and had made India their home, the British were just another such tribe. It was much later that they realized that the British had come to conquer and plunder, not to settle down in India. As soon as this was generally understood all over the country, a mighty revolution broke out in 1857, which has been incorrectly called by English historians the Sepoy Mutiny, but which is regarded by Indian people as the first war of independence. In the Great Revolution of 1857, the British were on the point of being thrown out of the country. They won at the end. Then there followed a reign of terror, the parallel of which it is difficult to find in history. Wholesale massacres took place, in the course of which innocent men were bound hand and foot and were blown up from the mouths of cannon. After the revolution of 1857, the British realized that by sheer brutal force they could not hold India long. They therefore proceeded to disarm the country. And the second greatest folly and mistake that our predecessors committed was to submit to disarmament. If they had not given up their arms so easily, probably the history of India since 1857 would have been different from what it has been. Having once disarmed the country completely, it has been possible for the British to hold India with the help of a small but efficient modern army. Along with disarmament, the newly established British government, now controlled directly from London, commenced its policy of divide and rule. This policy has been the fundamental basis of the British rule from 1858 till today. After 1857, for nearly 40 years, the policy was to keep India divided by putting 3/4 of the people directly under British control and the remaining 1/4 under the Indian princes. Simultaneously, the British government showed a great deal of partiality for the big landlords in British India. It is interesting to note in this connection the attitude of the British government towards the Indian princes since 1857. Up to 1857, the policy of British was to get rid of the princes wherever possible and take over the direct administration of their states. In the Revolution of 1857, though a number of Indian rulers, example the famous and heroic Rani of Jhansi, fought against the British, many remained neutral or actively sided with them. Among the latter was the Maharaja of Nepal. It then occurred to the British for the first time that it would perhaps be advisable not to disturb the existing princes, but to make a treaty of alliance and friendship with them, so that in the event of there being trouble for British, the princes would come to their aid. The present British policy of partially towards the Indian princes goes back therefore to the year 1857. By the beginning of the present century, the British realized, however, that they could no longer dominate India by simply playing the princes and the big landlords against the people. Then they discovered the Muslim problem in the year 1906 when Lord Minto was the viceroy. Prior to this, there was no such a problem in India. In the Great Revolution of 1857, Hindus and Muslims had fought side by side against the British, and it was under the flag of Bahadur Shah, a Muslim, that India's first war of independence had been fought. During the last World War, when the British found that further political concessions would have to be made to the Indian people, they realized that it was not enough to try and divide the Muslims from the rest of the population, and then they then set about trying to divide the Hindus themselves. In this way, they discovered the caste problem in 1918 and suddenly became the champions and liberators of the so-called depressed classes. Till the year 1937, Britain had hoped to keep India divided by posing as the champions of the princes, the Muslims and the so-called depressed classes. In the general election held under the new constitution of 1935, they found, however, to their great surprise, that all their tricks and bluffs had failed, and that a strong nationalist feeling permeated the whole nation and every section of it. Consequently, British policy has now fallen back on its last hope. If the Indian people cannot be divided, then the country India has to be divided geographically and politically. This is the plan called Pakistan, which emanated from the fertile brain of a Britisher and which has precedents in other parts of the British Empire. For instance, Ceylon, which belonged to geographically and culturally to India, was separated from India long ago. Immediately after the last war, Ireland, which was always a unified state, was divided into Ulster and Irish Free State. After the new constitution of 1935, Burma was separated from India, and if the present war had not intervened, Palestine would already have been divided into a Jewish state and an Arab state, and a British corridor running between the two, having themselves invented Pakistan or the plan of dividing India. The British have been doing a colossal but skillful propaganda in support of it. Though the vast majority of Indian Muslims want a free and independent India, though the president of the Indian National Congress is Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, a Muslim, and though only a minority of the Indian Muslims supports the idea of Pakistan. British propaganda throughout the world gives the impression that the Indian Muslims are not behind the national struggle for liberty and want India to be divided up. The British themselves know that what they propagate is quite false, but they nevertheless hope that by repeating a falsehood again and again, they will be able to make the world believe it. When Pakistan was originally invented, the idea was to divide India in a so-called Hindu India and a so-called Muslim India. However, fantastic the plan might have been, since then the fertile brains of the Britishers have developed the plan still further, and if they could have their own way, they would now divide India not into two states but into five or six. For instance, the British politicians say that if Indian princes want to secede from the rest of the India, they should have a separate state called Rajasthan. If the Sikhs want to secede, they should also have a separate state called Khalistan. And these cunning Britishers are showing special solitude for the Pathans and that section of Indian Muslims living in the northwest of India, and they are urging that there should be a separate state in the northwest of India called Pathanistan. Pathanistan seems to be the hot favorite of British politicians at the present moment. They hope that through this plan of Pathanistan, they would win over some of the most troublesome people in India, namely the people of the northwest province of India and the independent tribes living between India and Afghanistan, and at the same time get the sympathy of the Afghan people. Pakistan is of course a fantastic plan and a unpractical proposition for more reasons than one. India is geographically, historically, culturally, politically, and economically an invisible unit. Secondly, in most parts of India, Hindus and Muslims are so mixed up that it is not possible to separate them. Thirdly, if Muslim states were forcibly set up, a new majority problems would be created in these states, which would present new difficulties. Fourthly, unless Hindus and Muslims join hands and fight the British, they cannot liberate themselves, and their unity is possible only on the basis of a free and undivided India. An independent Pakistan is an impossibility, and Pakistan therefore means in practice dividing India in order to ensure British domination for all. It is noteworthy that in his latest utterances, Mr. Jinnah, the president of the Muslim League and a champion of Pakistan, has acknowledged that the creation and the maintenance of Pakistan is possible only with the help of the British. Now, to resume our story, the struggle that is now going on in India is in reality a contribution of the Great Revolution of 1857. In the last 4 decades of the 19th century, the Indian movement expressed itself in agitation in the press and on the platform. This movement was crystallized into one organization when the Indian National Congress was inaugurated in 1885. The beginning of this century saw a new awakening in India, and along with it new methods of struggle were devised. Thus, during the first 2 decades, we see the economic boycott of British goods on the one side and the revolutionary terrorism on the other. The Indian revolutionaries made a desperate attempt to overthrow British rule with the help of arms during the last war, at a time when Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Turkey were fighting our enemy, but the Indian revolutionaries were crushed. After the war, India needed a new weapon of struggle, and at this physiological moment, Mahatma Gandhi came forward with his method of satyagraha, passive resistance, or civil disobedience. During the last 20 years, the Congress under the Mahatma's leadership has built up a powerful organization all over the country, including the states of the princes. It has awakened political life in the remotest villages among all sections of the people. Most important of all is the fact that the masses of India have learnt how to strike at the powerful enemy even without arms, and the Congress under the Gandhi's leadership has demonstrated that it is possible to paralyze the administration through the weapon of passive resistance. In short, India has now a disciplined political organization reaching the remotest villages with the help of which a new independent state can be later on built up. The younger generation in India has, however, learnt from the last 20 years experience that while passive resistance can hold up or paralyze a foreign administration, it cannot overthrow or expel it without the use of physical force. Impelled by this experience, the people today are spontaneously passing on from passive to the active resistance, and that is why you read and hear today of the unarmed Indian people destroying railway, telegraph, and telephone communications, setting fire to police stations, post offices, and government buildings, and using the force in many other ways in order to overthrow the British yoke. The last stage will come when active resistance will develop into an armed revolution. Then will come the end of the British rule in India.